Hey guys, and welcome to a quick tutorial video for the Procedural Foliage Placement tool. In this video, we'll be taking a look at how to use the tool for world composition. And this came as a request from a member of the community. And after discussing it over Discord, I realized that a couple of other people also had questions on how to use the tool with world composition. So today we're going to go ahead and take a look at how to do just that. So here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to look at how to create a new level and set it up for world composition. We're going to be importing a tiled landscape. We're going to be applying the landscape materials to all of the tiles. And then finally, we're going to use the spawner, the procedural foliage placement tool, to spawn our trees correctly. And also we're going to see the correct way of spawning trees so then you can save them to each individual tile. In other words, having the trees load and unload with each individual tile, which is the correct way of doing it. So the first thing I'll say before we actually jump into Unreal is that I'm not going to spend too long explaining the mechanics as to how world composition works. There's a lot of things to learn about world composition, so this is going to be mostly focused on how to use the tool. So my recommendation would be to watch this video from Epic Games. This is the video I actually watched when I was trying to figure out world composition. I'm going to put a link in the description of this video, but it's basically a tutorial of getting started with world composition. It was a live training done all the way back in May 2017. So everything we're going to be going through today was actually covered in way more detail in this tutorial, but I'm just basically giving you the summarized version plus how to use the tool. Alright, so if I go ahead and jump into Unreal, I actually showed this in a shorter video yesterday. So let's just quickly see what we're going to create, and then we're going to start from scratch. So this, as you can see here, is a massive landscape, and the way I can tell you it's massive is if I just click play here and I maximize my screen, you can see that it's really big, and of course I'm zooming all the way out, and my character is going really fast when I'm sprinting, and even then you can see that the world is absolutely massive, right? So the whole point of world composition is that you can have Unreal basically glue together or stitch together many different landscapes into one massive landscape. That's kind of the 10-second explanation of it, right? If you create a landscape, there's only so much you can do with one specific landscape. So world composition basically allows you to, as you can see here, have landscapes behave as if they were individual tiles. You can see here as I'm hiding and showing different parts of the overall world. So you can use programs like World Machine, Terra Builder, Terra Sculptor. There's a lot of different software. I think World Machine is probably the main one, where you can create a massive landscape and export it in different tiles with coordinates like you can see here, x1, y0, x1, y1, x1, y2. And Unreal is very smart into trying to assemble the landscape based on the names here. And then once that happens and you have world composition, the landscape will actually load and unload based on the position of the player. So that's the whole point, right? If you're in this side of the map, most of this landscape will be unloaded to save on memory, and then as you move towards the map, parts will be loaded and unloaded. So that's the entire idea, right? So we're going to start from scratch, but I wanted to give you guys kind of a finalized look of what this is going to look like. So let's go ahead and go back to our maps folder, and we're going to create a new folder just to keep things nice and tidy here, and we're gonna let's say call this world composition tutorial. Oops. And the folder is empty, and I'm going under file, new level, and we're going to select the default level here. Save selected, no problem. It's just saving this level, and there we go. We have a brand new default level. Whoops. You can see my camera speed is really fast. So I'm going back to the world outliner. I'm going to get rid of a couple of things like the fog, reflection capture, the floor. I'm going to my light source. I'm going to make this movable, and my skylight, and I'm going to make them movable. And the reason for that is so we don't have to build lighting. My recommendation, if you have a massive world, you probably don't want to be baking light maps for such a massive world. You do want to do real-time lighting. So with that said, click on Save Current, and we're going to save our new map in the folder called WC Tutorial. And this is going to be the persistent level, right? This is going to be the top level of the hierarchy where it will always be loaded, right? So we're going to call this map world machine persistent. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call it that, map WC persistent, and it is saved. And now if you don't have this, I think you can go to Window, Levels, make sure that you have that open, and that basically, and you can dock it anywhere. In my case, I have it right here next to the world outliner. Here's how you're going to add additional levels for your world composition. But the first thing you're going to do is right here on your level, you're going to World Settings, and you're going to select the very first thing you see here, Enable World Composition. Tick this, go ahead and click on Save, and that's pretty much it. You have to do this, otherwise this will not work. Then the next thing we'll do is here under Levels, click, and you're going to see a few options. You're going to see Create New, and you can actually create your individual levels and add them manually. But in this case, we're going to import a tiled landscape. So click on Import Tile Landscape. And a quick note here, obviously what I'm going to do is one of the users from our community already sent me a sample landscape, which is what you just saw. So obviously I'm going to ask him if it's okay for me to share the files. If that is the case, then there will be a link in the description of the video. If he doesn't want me to share it, just know that there's a lot of different tutorials out there on how to use World Machine and other software that allows you to do this. Right, so that's out of the scope of this tutorial, but just know that there's software out there that allows you to create and export tile landscapes in a format that Unreal understands, right? So we're going to assume that either you can download the files that I'm using, or you can just create it with another program and you have them already on your disk, right? And you click on Import Tile Landscape. We're going to select Height Map Tiles. And in this case, I'm going to navigate to my local folder. In my case, here is called WC Height Maps. And you can see that I have a bunch of different files. And they're named aptly X0 underscore Y0, X0 Y1. And this naming convention basically tells Unreal how to arrange the landscape, right? So I'm going to go ahead and select everything and click on Open. And in this case, I'm going to deselect Flip Tile Y coordinate, okay? Again, depending on how you export your tile maps, you may need this option selected. In my case, for these files, we do not. In this case, we're not going to touch any other settings. It automatically detects the size of the landscape and says, hey, this is going to be using components of 8x8 sections, by 2x2 quads, by 3x63. Don't touch anything, leave everything as is. And in this case, we're not going to select a material here. We're just going to import the landscape. We're going to take this step by step, right? So go ahead and click Import. And you need to leave Unreal to do its thing. It's obviously going to take a couple of minutes here to import all of the different tile maps. And when it's done, it looks like nothing happened, right? So go ahead and click on Save All. But notice that now right here on the right hand side under Levels, under the persistent level, you have a bunch of additional things, right? 0, 0, 0, 1, etc. But they're all they look like they're dim, right? They're grayed out. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on one of them. I'm going to select the first one, right click, and select load. And that's actually going to load that section of the landscape into memory. And you can see that now you have a landscape. Looks like a nice little landscape that you can import, or you could make manually, right? And that's pretty much it. You're going to select the second one, click on load, and notice now that the second one here is loaded and it looks like it's continuing. You can see that there's no breaks, right? So you can click on the little eye icon here to hide or show. You can see that all of the landscape is just kind of continuing. So we don't have to do this manually. Go ahead and select all of them. Shift click, right click, and click on load. And that's going to load all of the different tiles into the level. Okay. Now understand that during runtime, the whole point of world composition is that it's going to define which ones are loaded and unloaded in memory automatically. Very similar to level streaming, right? So even though right now they're all loaded for the purposes of our demo here, when I click play, world composition is going to manage the loading and unloading of the different files, right? So again here, if I can choose to hide and show any of the different tiles here, or I can even unload certain tiles. But this is it. This is how you create a tile landscaping world composition. And if we go back to our PowerPoint here, we went over creating our new level, right? Remember we enabled the world composition. We just imported a tile landscape. And now let's go ahead and show you guys how to apply the landscape material. So let's go back to Unreal. And it's actually very simple. You don't even have to do anything here in the levels. You can just manually click on the actual landscape. And notice that when I click anywhere in the landscape, it'll actually show me what part of the landscape I'm selecting, what tile of the landscape I'm selecting. So this one right here is actually the very first one, the top one here. So if I hide it, you can see that it's hidden, right? So all you will need to do is you need to just click on your tile, and right here under landscape, there's going to be a tab, a place called landscape material. Click on the little arrow here and type terrain, and select terrain underscore advanced underscore standard. And that's the material instance that we want to use for this terrain. And this is going to be just like we've done before in other tutorials. The reason is pitch black is because you have to go here under landscape, go under paint, and you have to select all of the layers. Right now the layers have been created, but you can see that they have not been selected. So you have to click here and actually select the layer. And as soon as I do that, my computer's doing its thing. You can see in 1 second it's going to load the procedural landscape material. You can see that it's right here. And I'm going to finish loading all of the other ones here. All right, and I'm going back to the placement mode, and you can see that now this tile landscape is loaded. And if I get really close, you can see that the grass is spawning. It's basically exactly what you would expect, right? If it's too high, it'll have the snow, the grass only spawns on the grassy area, etc. So that's the process that you need to follow for all of the tiles in your landscape. So now if I select the next tile, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to select terrain underscore advanced. And here's the thing, and you can see that now it just adds it automatically, right? So we're going to do this. Let's go ahead and grab this from our content folder. That way it's easier. And with this selected, you can just click on the little arrow here, and you can see that it automatically adds them. So we're gonna continue doing this, and I know that this is tedious. So if you want to fast forward the video, feel free to do that. But I want to make sure that I show every single step in as much detail as possible. But this is pretty much it. The reason I am not multi-selecting landscapes, even though you could technically do that, is because you can lock up your editor, so just be careful. So I rather just take it one step at a time, even if it takes a little bit longer. it still ensures that it's not going to crash your editor. I selected, I think, 3 tiles earlier, and it was thinking for quite a while. So just take your time. You only have to do this once, obviously. After you assign the materials, then you just have to save the level, and everything is done. All right, so let's go ahead and click on Save All. It's going to save all of the new tiles that we have here. Okay, and that's it. So you can see here we have our tiled landscape, fully textured with our material. And if you change the settings of this material instance, just like before, you can change the grass factor, the snow intensity. All these different settings can be updated, and they will automatically update on every single tile. All right. So the next step is to actually start spawning some trees, right? So let's go back to the top level here. As soon as it saves, we're going to Blueprints, Environment. Oops, not environment, sorry. PFT underscore spawner. And then we have here VP Procedural Foliage Placement Tool. So grab this little guy and drop him right there. And we're going to scale it up. Let's say, I don't know, 1,000. Oops, sorry. Not here. We're going under Setup, and we're going to do the bounce scale here. Not here, but here. So instead of 200, let's call it 1,000 by 1,000. Oops. And you can see that it's very small. So I don't know, maybe 10,000. That's too much. 5,000, 6,000 perhaps. So it's going to take a little while to figure this out, right? So the best thing to do is actually to change from perspective and change it to top. And when you do that, you'll see that now we have a view of the landscape, and this is our blueprint that we still have selected if we go back to the world outliner. And now we can actually change the scale here and make sure that it covers most of the map. And I think that's good enough, right? 6,000 by 6,000 in this case would be okay. We're going to have a little edge, as you can see here, so you could probably play around with it, but for my purposes, that's going to be good enough. And if we look from one of the sides, you see that we have this little edge. I'm going to move this above the terrain here, just a little bit above. Remember, you have to be above your terrain. Okay, and now we can go back to perspective, and you can see that it looks like we have everything covered. Again, we have a small edge, but we're not going to worry too much about that, right? So now it's time to add the trees, right? So the same thing, we're going to go to Setup Spawn, and remember, guys, this is a massive landscape, so we do not want to be spawning actors. Even though we can convert them later, it's going to be way too intensive for performance. So we want to add hierarchical instance static meshes instead. So click on the plus sign here. And for the static mesh, we're going to select Pine, SM Pine Tree. And we're actually going to click on this little icon here to move to the folder where all of the other trees are. So it's going to be convenient. We're going to hover over here and see that the bounds are 470 by 454. We're going to put them here. 470, 454, and it was 1037. You need to add the bounds. Make sure you remember that. And in this case, we want to add, instead of 1,000, let's try to spawn 10,000 of them, right? We don't want to be here all day. Percent chance to spawn. This is new in the update. So if you don't see this option, the update is on its way. Hopefully by the time you watch this, you have the latest option, which is the 112. If you do not, don't worry, that update is already coming in just a few days. So we're going to do under spawn details, we're going to leave it at random location. We don't want to mess with that. And for the scaling, we want it uniform. And let's add some variance to our trees, right? So let's say that it's going to be between 0.8 to 1.2. We don't want it to be too different, right? But it just adds a little variety. We want it to have a random yaw and to be into the ground like this. And in this case, here's what we're going to do. We want to make sure that we adjust the height ranges here. And the best way to do that is to look at our settings for the material. So if you see here, we want the trees to be between the snow and the sand. So we see here that the snow starts at, where is it? 10,000. And the sand starts at minus 15,000. So I'm going to move that here. So basically what we want to do is we want to say that we want the height range for these trees to be minus 15,000 up to 10,000. Excuse me. And the slope in degrees from 0 to 40, that's going to be good enough, right? All right, now we want to add another set of trees, and we're going to go a little bit faster here. We're going to do the same thing, and we're going to do pine. But instead of pine, actually, I'm going to navigate. We want the snow tree here. And for the snow tree, we're going to add our bounds. 491, 454. 491, 454, 10, 12. For uniform scaling, the same thing, 0.8 to 1.2. And in this case, we want the trees to start at 10,000 and go up to whatever, I'm going to say 80,000. It doesn't really matter. It's not going to go that high, but the whole point is that the minimum needs to be the 10,000 that matches the material here. This is the snow, right? So the snow starts at height 10,000, and that's what we're going to put as the minimum height range here. And now we are going to add one more for the palm trees. And we're going to select the palm trees here, and we're going to click on the little arrow. And again, we want the measurements 790, 719. And the third one is 1578. There you go. One thing I forgot to add on the other one is we want 10,000 trees. Make sure you add an extra 0 here. We're going to do it here as well, 10,000. Max spawn. Uniform, we're going to do the same thing, 0.8 to 1.2. And actually in this case, we want to do something a little different. The palm tree models are way bigger in scale than the pines. So instead of making it 0.8 to 1.2, I'm going to make it 0.4 to 0.6. And that's just going to give it a similar scale and variance to the pine trees that we have. And that's the reason because the palms came from a different project from Epic Games compared to the pine trees. So the scales aren't exactly the same. One last thing is we're going to go to the batch settings, and we're going to change this between 5,000. We're going to make it 10,000. That way we don't have to do batching. It's going to try to spawn all 10,000 trees in one go as soon as we hit this button here. Okay, let's go ahead and save. And with that said, let's go and click on spawn HISMs. And you can see that we spawned 3,300 trees. So go ahead and press it again. You can see on the left hand corner that we're spawning about 3,200 trees every time, 3,000. Now let's change the index, HISM index to 1. We're going to be spawning the trees, the snowy trees, right? So again, spawn HISMs. Just press it a few times, and you can see that we're spawning about 900. And again, change the index to 2. That's going to be for the palm trees at the bottom. Oops. And one thing I forgot is to change the height for the palm trees. Very, very important. So remember that the palm trees start at minus 15,000. So what we need to do is make the maximum minus 15,000. And the minimum, something like minus 80,000, doesn't really matter, right? So again, because we're looking at the lower limit, we look at where the sand starts, and that's minus 15,000. And that's going to be the upper limit for the palm trees. and then the lower limit is going to be something even smaller than that. And sorry, I'm going fast because this can be pretty repetitive. If you watched the tutorial videos from before, you should know how to set this up. But again, I'm trying to do this live for you guys. So now that we have all that set up, let's go ahead and spawn the palm trees. Index 2, spawn HISMs, and we spawn about 2300. Let's click on it again, and let's click on it again. So we did about 3 for each one. Click on save. And it doesn't look like anything happened because we're so far. And look at my speed, camera speed is about 7, so I'm going really fast. So if I just zoom in here, you can see that actually we have a bunch, wow, of palm trees, as you can see here. Again, we were so far that we barely saw anything, right? I'm going to maximize. So you can see that we have palm trees in the sand, as we should. And then if we go a little higher, you can see that now the pine trees are in the grassy areas here, all around the mountains. And if we go even higher, you'll see that we have now the snowy parts and the trees that are there. So when we get close, we can see the trees are spawning correctly, and none of the trees are spawning with the rocky parts, right? So it looks like we've done it, right? We didn't really have to do anything special. All of the trees spawned, and if I just click on play here, and I'm going to quickly do a stats FPS, just so you can see the power of Unreal. This is really amazing, if you ask me. We have this massive landscape with thousands and thousands of trees, and look at my frame rate, almost at 120 rock solid, right? And you can see that we're traveling here. The trees have collision. Everything looks great, but look at what's happening there in the background, right? Somehow we see those trees all the way in the back there. You can see that they're loaded, but the landscape tiles are too far away and they're actually unloaded. So if we're going to start running that way, see what happens. Those tiles of landscape, and you can see that floating around, you can see there, unfortunately all those trees are loaded as well. So what's happening here? And as we get closer, those tiles get loaded back, and now you see why the trees were there, right? So depending on your game, depending on how fast you're going in your game, you may have to adjust the distance of how far those tiles load and unload. But we see here that we have a problem, right? Even though we have all our trees, it clearly works with world composition. The trees aren't disappearing with the tiles, right? And there's a good reason for that, right? The reason is that we've spawned all of our trees in our current level, which is the persistent level. If you've done world composition before, or if you've done level streaming, you'll know this already, but you have to specify to Unreal which one is your current level. And right now, the current level is going to be blue. So the persistent level, which is the level that's always active, was the current level, which means that anything we do in the world outliner will be saved to the persistent level. And what happens with that is that as we start hiding tiles, the trees are not saved with those tiles. They're saved at the persistent level. So we have to fix that, right? Because obviously this doesn't look correct. Plus, you want the trees to be saved with the tiles, because that means that also you save on performance. When that tile is hidden, that means that those trees can also be hidden, right? So what are we going to do? Again, it's not as difficult as it seems. So we're going to first remove all of our trees. Remove all. You can see that everything's deleted. And let's go ahead and save all of these landscape proxies. We're going to put all these guys. Let's go ahead and organize this a little bit. Let's move the light source and the sphere and the light sky into its own folder. We're going to call this I don't know, sky 0.sky. or light rather, makes more sense. And we're going to grab everything else, including the original landscape, plus all of the streaming levels and proxies, all of this. We're going to move this to a new folder, and we're going to call this landscapes. And now it's easy for us to select our little spawner here. And then you see that you have the player start somewhere here, which, you know, we're not using. So what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate our spawner here. We're going to just drag up, and you can see that we have another spawner. And what we're going to do is grab the first spawner and drag it all the way down below the landscape so it doesn't interfere with us. And we're going to grab the second spawner here, and we're going to match its size to a single tile. So if we go back to levels and we hide the initial tile, we're going to come all the way here, and we can see that this is a tile. So now we grab our procedural foliage placement tool here, and we come back to setup. We're going to try to match that tile. So let's just go with 1000 by 1000 for now, and see if we move it here, do we match that missing area? And we can go again to the top perspective here, and you can see that we're not matching the area. So we're trying to scale our spawner to the size of a single tile. So let's see, 1500 maybe by 1500. Yep. And it's not exact, but it's close enough. And for the purposes of this tutorial, we're going to leave it at that. For your real game, make sure that you get the exact measurement, right? But the idea is the same. We want to make sure that we cover the tile, and now we come back here and we enable the tile, and everything seems to be the same, right? But now we've aligned this spawner to only spawn trees on this tile. And now under levels, and here's the important part, we're going to the initial tile, and you can confirm by hiding and showing it, and we're going to right click and select make current. And if you deselect it, now you know that that sub level is now in blue, which means that now if we spawn our trees by selecting this spawner here, we're going to spawn our trees and they'll be saved with this tile. Extremely important detail here. So again, because we cloned this, we already have all of our trees and all of the settings copied here. So I'm going back to index 0, and I'm going to hit spawn HISM, and I'm going to hit it again, and I'm going to do the same thing for number 1, and again, and I'm going to do this for number 2, just in case we have a sandy area, which I don't think we will. 0, so you can see here, so there's no sand. All right, click on save all, and let's zoom in into our tile and see what's going on here as soon as this is saved. Whoa, lot of trees. And if I click on play and I maximize, look at this, extremely dense forest that we have. Too dense, actually, if you ask me. But that, you know, we made sure that we were trying to spawn 10,000 trees, and I think we spawned about 8,000 trees in a much smaller area. But if this is what you want, if this is what you're targeting, so you can see, and this is only in this tile, right? As you can see, this entire tile is populated, but if I move anywhere else, obviously nothing else is populated. All right. And now what happens if I go to the levels and I try to hide this tile? Notice that the trees hide with the tile. Oops. So I'm gonna kind of go like this, and if you hide it, everything is hidden. And if you show it again, the trees are there. And I'm sure you guessed it, the next, and I'm not gonna do this obviously for the entire landscape, but the next step would be to obviously grab the next style, right? And the next style is gonna be this area here, right here, and we're gonna do the exact same thing. We're going back to the top mode, and we are going to grab our landscape procedural spawner here, and we're gonna slide it down, and we're gonna move it and to cover the next style. And you could probably move it precisely by changing the X and Y values here. But again, for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. Now we're going to go back here and we're going to make sure that we can see this again. And right click on this style, make current, go back to the world outliner. And now you have this selected again. And we're going to do the exact same thing again. Reset the index. Click on spawn HISMs, and this time I'm only going to do it one time, so it's not that dense. Change it to index 1, spawn. Change it to index 2, and spawn. And again, you can confirm by coming to this area here and seeing that we still have a lot of trees. I click play. And you can see that we have a lot of palm trees because we're trying to spawn 10,000 trees. So even though I clicked on it once, you can see that we have a massive amount of trees here. All right. And again, the same thing as before. If I come back to the levels and I hide this tile, the trees are hidden with it. And that is the way that you would spawn your trees on a tiled landscape. That is really the trickiest part and what you need to remember. You have to go tile by tile, make it your current level, and then spawn the trees while that tile is active or the current level. Spawn the trees on that tile and repeat the process for every single tile. Once you do that, the World Composition Manager is going to hide and show tiles, and it'll have the trees that you've spawned loaded and unloaded with it. Which again, if you have a massive forest like I have here, if I keep this up, this density, it'll be over 100,000 trees or more. They will actually not be all loaded in memory, which means that you can actually make this an even bigger world. All right. I think that's pretty much it. Let me go back to the PowerPoint here. So we've created the level, imported the landscape, we've applied the material, we spawned our trees, and we showed you how to do it the incorrect way first, and then we did it the correct way per tile, and then I showed you how to save your trees on each tile to allow for seamless transitions, which is what I just showed you guys. That's pretty much it, guys. That is it. There is nothing else to be done. So remember, there's no special settings for the tool. All you need to do is to remember to select the landscape. Just follow the tutorials as I said, and make each individual tile the current level. Spawn your trees there and move on. Again, it can be tedious if you have a really big world, but you only have to do this again once, and then you just have to save your level, and it's done. All right. Thank you guys so much. Hopefully this helped some of you that had questions about world composition. Again, this was from a request from a user. So hopefully you can follow this tutorial and make sure that you have your game working correctly now. And if you have any other questions or suggestions, make sure that you leave them in the comments below, or you can go ahead and reach me at my Discord channel. So thank you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next video.